Gloria Allred, a longtime advocate for women's rights. Victims whose rights have been violated need her tireless and successful advocacy. Many of her legal battles have led to precedent-setting court decisions. Gloria has won countless honors for her groundbreaking legal work over the course of her 4-decade legal career, often in high-profile cases focusing on women's and minorities' rights. That said, I'm delighted to welcome Gloria Allred to the Next Big Thing podcast today. Thank you for joining us, Gloria. How are you today?
Just fine. Thank you very much for inviting me, Swarna.
Thank you so much. Gloria, you've been a strong advocate for the victims of the Me Too movement, or if I may call them survivors, because, it hasn't really stopped. Abuses are still going on. So if I may ask you, what is the problem as you see it? Who exactly is the problem?
Well, I always think of every problem as an opportunity as well as being a problem, an opportunity to become empowered and to win justice after one has suffered injustice. For a long time, for example, sexual predators, sexual harassers use their power to place their victims in fear. And fear was their weapon of choice. Either they threatened them if they would speak out or take any action against them, or they may have threatened their families, or maybe they didn't threaten, but the person who was victimized felt that they would be retaliated against if, in fact, they said or did anything. So they remained paralyzed by the fear that they had, and that meant that the predator or the harasser could continue to prey on others. Now, many of the victims or survivors, as you called them correctly, have decided they're going to break out of that fear, that the cost of fear and living in fear is greater than the cost of moving forward. But moving forward doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be public. And that's something for them to understand. They can, for example, consult a private attorney such as me or any other private attorney to learn what their rights are. Any such consultation is by law completely confidential, can't go anywhere. So that's what they should do, is find out what their options are, what the benefits and risks of exercising any of those options are, and then decide what, if anything, they wish to do. Doing nothing maintains the status quo, and often the victims or survivors will take some action, but it would be self-harming. They will turn their rage inward. They will become depressed. They may engage in self-cutting or become, anorexic or bulimic. They may just become so depressed that they can't even move or do anything. It's just rage turned inward. When they learn their options, which is, for example, to involve themselves in a confidential settlement with the help of an attorney to achieve that settlement, or they decide to file a lawsuit, or they decide to go to the police, or they decide to exercise a combination of those options. That's important that they at least know what their possible choices are. And not knowing their choices and their options, of course, keeps them living in fear. Generally, in any institution of higher learning or, the secondary schools, victims never learn what their options are. They don't know what their rights are. Generally, that is not discussed on television or on the internet. And being ignorant of what their rights are really has a cost as well. So I am encouraged by the fact that more and more women are becoming empowered, that we can work with them to support them. They are not alone. And I always say courage, Swarna, is contagious. That when they see others exercising their rights and being rewarded because they do, it is something that is contagious for survivors. They say, oh, wait, maybe I can do that too. And once a woman is empowered or a girl is empowered, there's no going back. All right. That has a ripple effect, not only on her, she becomes transformed because she knows it's something she can do. But in addition, has a ripple effect on her family, maybe on her daughters, on her friends, on her coworkers, on her community. Even though she doesn't know it, it does. As women become stronger, it does have that wonderful effect. So empowerment is my goal, and helping them to make the predator, the sexual harasser, accountable for what he did to them is extremely important to that survivor and also to her community.
Excellent. I mean, very inspiring. Gloria, you've had an incredible career and your journey is just very inspirational. So tell us, how did you become the person you are today?
Well, I've always had to be a survivor. When I began, when I was a little girl, I was an only child. I lived in a row house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with my parents. My father was a door-to-door salesman. We only had enough money for the next day for food. He would put that out every day for my mother to shop for just that day for groceries. And my mother was a full-time housekeeper and homemaker, essentially, for our home. And she was a wonderful mother. I was very fortunate to have a wonderful, hardworking father who loved me and, did the best he could for my mother and me. But, it was not an easy life in that way. I had a great public school education. I was able to go to University of Pennsylvania and be graduated and have a master's degree. I became a single mother at a certain point after I was married in college and divorced in college, and had a baby in college, which my father called the College of Hard Knocks. And then I had to kind of make it on my own, which I always knew that I would have to do. And at some point I moved to California and met my second husband. I went to law school. I started a law practice with two of my classmates from law school, and that was one of the best decisions of my life. And I'm still partners with my law school classmates, 47 years. We've been together, and they have a big heart for women, brilliant lawyers, fighting for justice. So I just am very fortunate, and I've always felt that I need to give back because I've been so fortunate to help women and girls and also minorities. We've been very involved, pioneers for lesbian rights, gay rights, transgender rights. And we love fighting for justice for our clients. We think they deserve it and so much more. And that's what we do every day. And that's what I am committed to doing, Swarna, for the rest of my life.
No, absolutely. Gloria, my next question would be, in your 40 plus career, you've seen many changes, especially with the US Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. Now, since you represented Jane Roe in the earlier case, the historic case, how was the transition for you?
Well, I actually represented her after the Supreme Court made the decision in Roe v. Wade. Yeah. But because I was at a big rally in Washington against violence against women and in favor of choice, and she came up to me and introduced herself, and I asked her if she was speaking at the rally, and she said no, she wasn't being asked to speak by the pro-choice movement. She wanted to know if I could help her speak, and of course I did. And then she and I worked together for many years in support of the right to choose legal, safe, affordable, and available abortions. she's passed, at some point in her life, she changed her mind, decided to go to the anti-choice movement. But, in the end, in a deathbed confession, she confessed that she'd always been pro-choice, and she only went to the anti-choice movement because she essentially needed the money, and they were paying her to speak out against the right to choose abortion. I had an abortion when it was a crime for a doctor or a nurse to provide one in California. Thank God I survived. And I don't want any other woman or girl to ever have an illegal abortion, a back alley abortion, as I did have to have, because it was a crime in California, for a healthcare provider to provide it. And of course, the battle is never between abortion or no abortion. That's kind of a false narrative. It's between legal and safe abortion or illegal and unsafe abortion. It was very disturbing that the Supreme Court made its decision to reverse the precedent of Roe v. Wade, which is actually a super precedent because it was affirmed previously by the U.S. Supreme Court, and essentially to turn it back to the states. And the impact is exactly what it was when I had to have my abortion in the late 60s, when states also could choose whether to criminalize abortion or not, and many states did. That's exactly what's happening now, and it's really very dangerous for women. It's brutal, it's cruel, it's horrific. There are no words for what this means, because about half of the states will already have decided to make abortion illegal. Some have trigger laws which went into effect or are about to go into effect as soon as the judgment became final, which it just did, I think, about a week or two ago. Others are in the process of passing laws to further restrict abortion. And some states now are going to constitutional amendments to their state constitution. For example, there is a vote tomorrow in Kansas on their state constitution and whether it should allow or forbid women to have an abortion in that state. In California, we are a very pro-choice state. That's where I'm doing this podcast from. But we are going to have a constitutional amendment on our ballot in November. And we believe that we will have the votes, and we're going to have to fight to get people to the polls to get the votes to make abortion a constitutional right in our state constitution. At this point, we are a haven state, meaning many women and girls are coming here, as they are to New York, for example, which is also a haven state where I also practice law, to get a safe and legal abortion. But there are many women and girls who cannot afford to come to California New York or other haven states to get an abortion. And they can't leave their job, or they have other children, they can't get childcare. And so, they are in complete distress. I mean, mandatory motherhood has become a reality, where a fertilized egg has more rights than an adult woman. It's just absolutely outrageous and dangerous. I have a client, I have actually a number of clients that are travel nurses, and they have been telling me about what's going on in some of the states that they have been working in that have outlawed abortion. Women are coming in with ectopic pregnancies, for example. They need help or they're carrying a fetus that is dead, and the doctors are afraid to perform abortions on them for fear they will be prosecuted, or they will, face some civil lawsuit against them if they perform an abortion, or both. And so I said, well, what are the doctors saying to the women who are coming into the emergency room? And she said, They're saying go out and sit in your car in the parking lot, and when we start to hemorrhage or you burst, come back in. We can take care of you then, but we can't help you now. Well, this is dangerous to a woman's life because carrying a dead fetus, for example, can be septic, can cause infection to the woman, can mean that her life is being threatened. And by the way, some of these, elected officials who think they should be able to decide for a stranger, a woman, whether she can get a safe and legal abortion or not, they're the ones that are at fault because these women are literally going to die or be maimed if they can't get an abortion. So this is what's happening now. And of course, Swarna, the women that are most affected are poor women and young women and rural women and women of color because they are already facing higher risk for pregnancy because of discrimination in healthcare. But in addition, often they're living lives of poverty, many of them, or they just can't afford to go to another state to get an abortion. So this is so cruel and so dangerous, and it's so wrong. But, complaining about it is just not going to do it. We've got to take action. We have to remember in November, we have to go to the polls even before November and vote out Republicans who are anti-choice, and mainly it is Republicans who are anti-choice, or, and vote for pro-choice elected officials. And those are mainly Democrats. But if they're anti-choice Democrats, vote them out as well. So we have to exercise our power. We have the power of the vote. It took us 72 years in the United States for women to win the right to vote. Now we have to use it, and we can use it. Being powerless only helps the anti-choice politicians. We have to exercise our power. We do it by voting. We do it by running for office ourselves. And we do it by going, not only to the courthouse, but also to the legislatures, by protesting in the streets. We go to rallies. I have spoken not long ago at a rally in the street the day the decision came down. About 10 days later, I spoke at a big protest rally at City Hall in Los Angeles. We have to do everything and anything that I used to say legal and peaceful, Swarna. Now I only say legal. The days for being peaceful, that's over. This is really so outrageous, and we must contribute to Planned Parenthood. We used our money, our time. We have to do everything we can do. As the famous labor organizer Mother Jones once said, don't agonize, organize. That's what we're doing in support of choice.
Gloria, I also wanted to ask you about accountability. When it comes to all these cases, be it the Me Too movement or any of the high-profile cases like Bill Cosby, the Johnny Depp case, how does accountability get done when the sound of the public opinion is slowly becoming the voice of the United States justice?
Well, when we file lawsuits, for example, in court, that's seeking accountability against the defendant. So, for example, as you know, we filed a lawsuit recently. Well, not recently, but a lawsuit was filed, I think it was 2014, for our client, Judy Huth, against Bill Cosby, alleging that she was the victim of child sexual abuse by Mr. Cosby way back in 1975. We litigated this case for, more than 7 years. We finally got to trial. And I'm very happy to say, even though Mr. Cosby had a very well-funded small army of attorneys and paralegals and so forth to fight against us on everything, just about, we won. A jury found that, in fact, Mr. Cosby had sexually battered, in other words, sexually molested our client when she was 16 years old at the Playboy Mansion in Southern California, and awarded Ms. Huth, our client, $500,000. Now, of course, no amount of money will ever make this right for him to have sexually molested a child. However, it is a form of accountability, and that will forever be on his legacy. It will be in his obituary that he sexually molested a child. So we're very proud of the courage of our client, Judy Huth, but it took a lot of courage to go through what was necessary to get to trial and to testify at trial. And so that is a form of accountability for Mr. Cosby. In addition, there are other forms of accountability. For example, criminal cases, like the criminal case against Harvey Weinstein. I represented the key prosecution witness in New York on that case, and Mr. Weinstein was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal sexual assault of my client, Mimi Haley. And based on what happened to her, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now there is a criminal case pending in Los Angeles against Mr. Weinstein, which at this point is scheduled to go to trial in October, so just a few months from now. And there I represent two of the alleged victims for whom charges have been filed. So even though he was convicted in New York, it is still going to proceed in Los Angeles. So I also represent, accusers of Cuba Gooding Jr. And of course, I represented 20 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and on and on. So the bad news is that there is still so much injustice and, gender violence against women. The good news is that women are doing something about it, and they're contacting me and saying, I want to know my options. And then after they think about it, they say, I want to do something about it. Many of them say to me, well, their mother said, call Gloria Allred. Or they say, I've decided I'm not suffering in silence anymore. I've got to do something about this. And I'm just sick of what he did. Sometimes women are saying, I saw that he abused someone else. I wish I had done something when he did it to me. And so it's just exciting to see women become transformed from victims to survivors and then ultimately to fighters for change, Swarna. You probably saw my Netflix documentary, which is still streaming on Netflix, called Seeing, as though you're looking through glasses, Seeing Allred, my name. And really in there you see, for example, many of my clients who were accusers of Bill Cosby, when it was too late for them to file a lawsuit or to get a settlement, many of them went with me to the legislature and helped to testify to win change in the laws to provide an extended statute of limitations, meaning a longer period of time for persons who allege they were victimized to be able to come forward to assert their rights. And we were successful in doing that in California and in Nevada and in Colorado and elsewhere. So, it's interesting to see how women have decided they are going to become empowered and they are going to help to win change. And I always say, Swarna, no one ever gives women any rights. No one ever did. In Canada, in the United States, or in any other country in the world, we always have to fight to win our rights. And then after we win them, we have to stay vigilant to preserve them.
Wow. Gloria, in conclusion, I just wanted to ask you that in this era of virulent anti-feminism, are we witnessing a gleeful display of victim blaming at a massive scale?
I do agree with you, Swarna, that there is a lot of victim blaming, victim shaming, but that's just a tactic. And if they're doing that, it means that we are making a difference. All right. Because if you're not being attacked, it means nobody really cares about what you're saying. It's not important. So, I mean, I always understand. Of course, I get attacked all the time. I have for 47 years, called all kinds of things. I always say when people call you names, it means they don't have a good argument against what you're saying. If they had a good argument, they would give the argument. They wouldn't call names. So that's a sign to me that I'm winning. And that's the way victims and survivors should understand it, not to be deterred by it. It's a tactic to try to intimidate you. That was done to many of my clients in the R. Kelly case, but they were not going to be intimidated. All right. So they persisted and they were brave and they testified against Mr. Kelly in the criminal case. And as a result, recently we went to New York where the case was being prosecuted. I went with my clients who were the majority of the victims in that case. Many of them were underage girls when he, sexually victimized them. And they were brave and they spoke out. As a result, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. And he's now facing 3 other prosecutions. So the victims did make a difference. They became survivors. They became fighters for change. And they should be proud of themselves. I'm very proud of them. So again, when that happens, don't let it deter you. That was the purpose of the weapon of calling you names. And you have to recognize that and not be controlled by that tactic. Don't let that weapon affect you. Seek support. You're not alone. Others can help you and advise you and support you, but you just have to reach out and do that.
Right. But final question, I wanted to ask you about the domestic violence case involving Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It was televised and it was subject to almost unrelenting media coverage, almost all of it in favor of one litigant. So what do you think? Many people called it strange, illogical, unjust ruling. What do you think about that?
Well, she was not my client. Apparently she did say on the internet at some point early on she had consulted me. But, all I can say is I did not represent her in the lawsuit. Lawsuits are, it's like being involved in a war. And war is really a challenge for both sides are involved in the war. It's interesting. She did win and he won, but he won a larger verdict than she did. And so that's a loss for her in the sense that that's a significant verdict. And, she'll definitely appeal it and that is necessary. Most cases are settled prior to going to trial. Because if every case went to trial, the system would break down. There wouldn't be enough judges. And that's the case civilly, the civil lawsuits such as Amber had. And it's also true in criminal cases where a plea may be entered and then there's no trial. Okay. But some cases are going to go to trial, and that is then full-scale warfare, as it was with us in the Bill Cosby case. But having said that, you're right. It was like hers was high profile with television in the courtroom. We did not agree in our Bill Cosby case, that neither did the other side, to have it televised. That may have made it easier for our client. We'll never know. But she wanted her right to privacy in terms of course, she was public when she testified, but not to have it televised. And we supported her in whatever she decided. So I really feel for Amber. This is definitely life-changing for her. And we'll see what happens on appeal. It's hard to win on appeal and have a verdict that becomes a judgment reversed, but it's possible. and we'll see what happens. I wish her the best.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us and giving me the time to talk to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. And I hope you come back and talk to us again.
I did. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on the
Thank you
next
so
big
much.
thing.